May, June 2023, paper 2, variant 3. Question 1. How far does the object travel at a constant speed? Where's the section where it was traveling at a constant speed? This section from time 5 seconds to 15 seconds. Can I find the distance? How far does it travel? The area under the graph. This is the area of a rectangle. The length is from 5 to 15, which is 10 times 5, which is 50 meters. Which statement about a falling object accelerating close to Earth's surface is correct? The weight of the object is increasing. Is the weight increasing? No, the weight is constant, right? The weight is constant. The resistive force is increasing because of the air resistance. The weight of the object and the force of the air resistance are equal magnitude but in opposite directions. When is the weight equal to the air resistance? When it reaches the terminal speed and it's moving with a constant speed, zero acceleration. The weight is not equal yet, not yet, okay? But that's when it's quite far away. The weight of the object is constant, but the force of air resistance increases. Yes, the force of air resistance increases as the speed increases. An aircraft is moving at 60 meters per second in a northerly direction. When a crosswind from the east starts to blow, the speed of the wind is 13 meters per second. What is the magnitude? So one of them is north at 60 meters per second, and then from the east, we can say it's blowing from the east to the west in this direction at 13. So 60 and 13, you can find the resultant of this magnitude using Pythagorean's theorem, square root 60 squared plus 13 squared, which would be slightly greater than 60, almost 61 meters per second. Two rectangular blocks consist of different materials. 4 different methods are used or suggested to compare the masses. Let's check out these methods. Compare the accelerations with which they fall freely. If they have different masses or equal masses or whatever, would they differ? Would the acceleration with which they fall differ? No, the acceleration would be the same. Why? Because if you ignore air resistance, they would fall with the same acceleration and hit the ground with the same speed. So one is wrong. Compare the values of their length, width, and height. Would this differ? Would this give us the mass? No, it would not. It would actually give us the volume. Hang each in turn from the same spring. Compare the extensions. Would that give me a change in the mass or a change in the weight? Yes, it could. Yes, it could. It would give me the change in the weight, for example, and then I could use this weight to find the mass. Place one in the right hand pan of a beam balance and the other one in the left hand. Yes, we can compare the masses this way. So you have 3 and 4 only. 3 and 4 only. An object in a space probe above the Earth weighs 3.5 newtons. The gravitational field strength at that position is 7 newtons per kilogram. The gravitational field strength of the Earth is 9.8. What are the mass and the weight of the object? Okay, on the Earth's surface. Can I find the mass and can I find the weight? Okay, first of all, can I find the mass of the object? Yes, because you have the weight of this object and you have the gravitational field strength at that point in space. Right? To find the mass, weight equals mg, so mass equals weight over g, which is 3.5 over 7, so the mass is 0.5 kilograms, right? So the mass is 0.5. Can I find the weight on Earth? Weight on the Earth's surface, yes, weight equals mg, so 0.5 times 9.8, which is 4.9 newtons. A cyclist is traveling in a straight line along a horizontal road at a constant speed. Constant driving force acts on the cyclist in the forward direction shown. Which statement about the magnitude of the frictional forces acting on the cyclist is correct? The frictional forces, okay? The magnitude is equal to F. The friction forces, would the friction force be equal to F if he's moving with a constant speed? Yes, they would be equal to F, right? Because you have the resistive forces, they would be equal to F since the acceleration is zero. The resultant force is now zero. You have a driving force and you have a resisting force which are equal. A spring has an unstretched length of 3 centimeters. When a force of 16 newtons is applied to the spring, it has a length increase, or the length increases to 5 centimeters. It was 3, it became 5. The limit of proportionality is not exceeded. What is the spring's constant? Can I find the spring's constant? Yes. K equals F over X. K equals F over X. X is the extension. The force was 60 newtons and the extension was 5 minus 3, which is 2, right? 5 minus 3. So this is 30 newtons per centimeter. The diagram shows the minimum force F1 acting vertically. The log needs to be lifted by a smaller force than F1. By a smaller force than F1. The diagrams show the changes tried. Each diagram has only one change from the original diagram. In each case, F2 is the minimum force required to lift the log. F2 needs to be smaller than F1, right? F2 needs to be smaller than F1. So you have P, Q, and R, right? You have these three suggestions. Which of these could be correct? P, Q, and R. So let's check them out. What happened in P? Increasing the length of the pivot. When you increased the length, when you increased the distance between the force and the pivot, would this increase the moment? Yes, it would increase the moment. Yes, it would increase the moment. Okay. In Q, applying the force perpendicular to the lever. So F2 wasn't actually perpendicular. So therefore, the resultant force acting at that position, the resultant perpendicular force acting at that position would actually be slightly smaller than F2. Now, if you apply F2 at a perpendicular direction, at a perpendicular angle, 90 degrees, exactly 90 degrees at that position, would it apply a greater moment? Yes, it would apply, it would cause a greater moment at that point. It would cause a greater moment at that point. So P is correct, Q is correct. Increasing the distance from the log to the pivot, from the log to the pivot, if I increase this distance, would it be easier for him to pick up this log? No, it wouldn't. This would be a wrong answer. Actually need to increase this distance as in P. So only P and Q are correct. Only P and Q are correct. A ball of mass 0.25 kilograms hits a wall at the speed of 16 meters per second. It then rebounds back along its original path at the speed of 12 meters per second. What is the impulse experienced by the ball? Okay, impulse is mv minus mu, right? mv minus mu. But you have two directions, so one of them has to be negative, right? One of them has to be negative. If you say that the 16 is negative, instead of writing 16 meters per second, I'll write down negative 16 meters per second. So 0.25 times 12 minus 0.25 times negative 16, right? This will give you an impulse of 7 Newton seconds, right? Okay. A bicycle braking system transfers energy from kinetic to an internal energy store. A motor converts energy from chemical energy to a kinetic energy store. What enables these energy transfers? The braking system. In the braking system, how can you convert the kinetic to internal energy store? This friction is due to what? Is due to some mechanical work. You have two options. You only have two options. It's either mechanical or electrical work. While riding the bicycle, is there any electrical work being done? No, there isn't any electrical work being done. So only the mechanical work will do this, will change the kinetic to internal energy. What about the motor? Okay, the electric motor, it changes chemical energy from the battery to kinetic energy. This change of energy would be due to what? Due to some electrical work being done, right? some electrical work. So only mechanical and electrical, yes. Research is being done, okay, being carried out to produce electrical energy from the fusion of hydrogen nuclei, which row shows the shows two of the problems. You have two of the problems in designing this fusion reaction. Okay, so we know that the fusion, the sun, when you combine two small nuclei, you can produce huge amounts of energy. The temperature needed is it very low? No, it's actually very high. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands of degrees, maybe in the millions of degrees. Why obtaining a high density of hydrogen nuclei is difficult. The nuclei are negatively charged. Are the nuclei negatively or are they positively? Yes, they are definitely positively charged. So they repel each other. The engine of a motor vehicle develops a large power. Which statement is correct? The driving force develops what? It develops a large power. The driving force acting on the vehicle must be large. No, it could be large, it could be small. Okay, depends on the energy. Okay, it depends on the energy, the work done, and the time. So we're talking about the power. The engine must have a very large volume. It doesn't have to do with the volume. Must transfer large amounts of energy each second. Yes, energy per unit time. Energy per second. Yes. Okay, now moving on. Graph shows how the pressure due to a liquid varies with the depth below or beneath the liquid surface. The gravitation field strength is 9.8. What is the density of the liquid? What is the density of the liquid? So you have the pressure, you have the depth, you have the G. Can I find the density? Yes, because pressure, okay, equals rho GH. We need to find rho, which is the density, right? Pressure over GH. So the density would be equal. Let's take a point. Let's take an easy point. For example, this point. You'd have a pressure of 4,000 and a depth of 0.5. So 4,000 divided by G, which is 9.8, times the height or the depth, which is 0.5. To find the density, yes, this would give you around 820 kilograms per meter cubed. Okay? Okay. What is the lowest possible temperature? Absolute zero in degrees Celsius. What does this mean? What happens? The lowest possible temperature would be negative 273 degrees Celsius. Particle energy. Particles have the least kinetic energy. Particles have the least. Doesn't have to do with the gravitation. Has to do with the kinetic energy, the least amount of kinetic energy. Which statement about the particles of a substance after condensation is correct? After they condense, what happens? They are close to each other and slide over each other because they become liquid. Yes, this is true. Two otherwise identical cars, one black and one white, are at the same initial temperature. Okay, they are left in the bright sunshine during the night. Their temperature decrease. Which car shows the greater rate of temperature increase and which one shows the greater rate of temperature decrease? Definitely the black one shows the greater increase and the black one shows the greater decrease. Why? Because the black is the best absorber of infrared radiation and at the same time the best emitter of infrared radiation. A drop of water from a tap falls onto the surface of some water at a constant depth. Water waves spread out the water on the surface of the water. Okay, which statement is correct? Which statement is correct? The waves are longitudinal. Waves, water waves, are they longitudinal? No, they are not. Water waves travel this way, which are transverse and travel at the same speed. Do they travel at the same speed? Yes, they do travel at the same speed because they have the same wavelength at any direction. So they do travel at the same speed. Which diagram shows a converging lens being used as a magnifying glass? To find a magnifying glass, you'd need the object to be at a distance much less than the focal length. Distance much less than the focal length, which is D. The object is at a distance less than the focal length. And the image is virtual and behind enlarged. Monochromatic ray. What does monochromatic mean? Which property of the ray always remains the same as it moves from air to glass? As it moves from air to glass, the frequency does not change at all. Frequency doesn't change. Okay. Question 20. A narrow beam of white light passes through the prism. Which row is correct? Color 1, 2, and 3. Come on, this is easy. Blue, no. Red, blue, yellow, no. Red, yellow, blue, yes. Red, yellow. You have the colors Roy Gviv. A student writes 4 statements matching communication system to the region of the electromagnetic spectrum. Which statement is correct? Wireless internet uses visible wavelengths. No. Wireless internet would use the don't use the visible wavelengths, which is light. It doesn't use light at all. No. Okay. Mobile phones use X-rays. No, they use microwaves. Cable television uses infrared wavelengths. Cable television using the optical fiber. Yes, it could use the infrared wavelengths. Bluetooth uses the ultraviolet. No, it uses the radio waves. So this is the wrong answer. A ship sounds a horn when it is 790 meters from a cliff. A passenger on the ship hears the echo 4.8 seconds later. What is the speed of the sound? Can I find the speed of the sound? Yes. Speed equals, this is an echo, so 2 distance over time. This is an echo. So 2 times 790 over 4.8. What is 2 times 790 over 4.8? This gives you a speed of 329 or 330 meters per second. Which row gives the metal used to make the core of an electromagnet and one property? The core of an electromagnet has to be iron. Property, it has to be a temporary magnet. That's the whole point of creating an electromagnet. A plastic rod and a dry cloth are uncharged. The rod is now rubbed, okay, and they both become charged. The rod becomes negatively charged. The rod becomes negatively charged. The charge on the cloth, the charge on the cloth, it has to be positive since the other one is a negative charge, and the particles that have moved are the electrons. You cannot move the neutrons or the protons. Even if you move the neutrons, it doesn't affect the charge. A student does an experiment to investigate the resistance of a metal wire. The graph shows the results of the experiment. What is plotted on the x-axis? Resistance of a metal wire. What could I plot on the x-axis? As something increases, okay? As something increases, the resistance decreases, right? This is an inversely proportional graph, right? It's an inversely proportional graph. So as something of this wire increases, the resistance decreases. What is it? The diameter? Yes, it is the diameter, right? It is the diameter. Could have been the diameter, could have been the area, yet. So as the diameter increases, the resistance decreases. The length is directly proportional, temperature directly proportional. The current, no, it is wrong. The cost of an electrical energy is $0.25 for each unit of 1 kilowatt hour. A 2200 watt heater is switched on for 48 minutes. What is the cost of this use? Okay, first of all, I need to find the amount of energy used, right? The amount of energy used would be in kilowatt hours. In kilowatt hours. The power energy equals power times time. The power is 2.2 kilowatts, right? 2.2 kilowatts. You have to convert it to kilowatts. Why? Because we are finding it in kilowatt hours. So divide by 1000, the power is 2.2 kilowatts, right? And the time taken in hours. The time taken in hours. This is 48 minutes. What is 48 minutes in hours? When you divide it by 60, okay, so divided by 60, this would be 0.8 hours. What's 2.2 times 0.8? 2.2 times 0.8, this would be 1.76 kilowatt hours. This is the amount of energy used. This is the amount of energy used. All you need to do is multiply it by the cost Okay, so multiplied by the cost times 0.25 times 0.25, which would be $0.44. This is the total cost for using this electrical appliance, this heater, for 48 minutes. The table describes four different resistance wires. They are all made of the same metal. Which wire has the smallest resistance? How can I decrease the resistance? How can you decrease the resistance? By decreasing the length and increasing the diameter. So it's B. Decreasing the length and increasing the diameter. Circuit shows three switches and four lamps, P, Q, R, and S. Which switches must be closed to only light lamps P and R? So we need P and R, right? P and R. So let's see. I think we need switch 1, right? Switch 1 will pass the current through lamp P. This is correct. And then we do not need Q, so we'll not switch on 2. And it will automatically pass through R. So P and R are controlled using switch 1, right? They are both controlled using switch 1 only. So this is correct. Do I care about 2 or 3? No, 2 would control Q, 3 would control S. Diagram shows the magnetic field around the solenoid carrying an electric current. What happens to the strength and the distance between the lines when the current is increased? As you increase the current, what happens to the magnetic field strength? It increases, right? It increases. What about the distance between the lines? The distance decreases as you increase the field strength, as you increase the magnetic field strength. What happens to the distance between the lines? It also decreases, indicating that you have a stronger field. Diagram shows a wire hanging freely between the poles of a magnet. Okay, between the poles of a magnet. There is a current in the wire in the direction shown. The magnet and the current cause a force on the wire. In which direction does this force act? Now, using Fleming's left-hand rule. Fleming's left-hand rule. Okay. First finger would be pointing to the left, right? Second finger would be pointing downwards, and therefore your thumb would be pointing into the page, right? Into the page, exactly. The thumb would be pointing into the page, correct. Which components of a DC motor, but not in an AC generator? Both have a coil, yes. Both have brushes. They both have the magnets, but the split ring commutator is only found in the DC motor. A transformer has 5,500 turns on the primary coil and 500 on the secondary coil. The output of the secondary coil is 110 volts and is connected to a heater. The transformer is 100% efficient. The heater produces a power of 132 watts. What is the current in the primary coil? Okay, can I find, first of all, the current in the secondary coil? Yes, I can find the current in the secondary coil. Why? Because you have the power and you have the voltage. So IS would now be equal to the power divided by Vs, right? 132 divided by Vs, which is 110, right? 132 divided by 110, this is 1.2. So Is is equal to 1.2. We know the equation Vp Ip equals Vs Is. Instead of using Vp and Vs, can I use NP and NS? Yes, I can, because they are both directly proportional. Instead of finding the voltages, but not, I can I can use the number of coils, which would be much faster. So I'll write down NP IP equals NS IS. The number of turns in the primary is 5,500 times IP, which I do not know, is equal to 500 multiplied by 1.2. When you divide by 5,500, this would give you a current much smaller. Current would decrease, yes, which is 0.11, yes, 0.11 amperes. The scattering of alpha particles from a thin gold foil produces the following observations. Which conclusion does not follow from these observations? Which conclusion does not follow from these observations? So let's check out the observations. Most of the alpha particles pass through the foil, okay? Most of the alpha particles are virtually undeflected, pass through the foil undeflected, okay? A small fraction of the alpha particles are deflected through large angles. Okay, undeflected, deflect through large angles. Small fraction of the alpha particles bounce back. Okay. Most of the mass is in the nucleus. Most of the mass is in the nucleus, yes, because of the bouncing back. So most of the mass is definitely in the nucleus. Most of the atom is empty space, yes, because most of them pass undeflected. So this is correct. The nucleus consists of protons and neutrons. The nucleus consists of protons and neutrons. Well, they didn't actually know that the nucleus consists of protons and neutrons back then when they conducted this experiment. Let's check on D. The nucleus must be charged. Yes, the nucleus had to be charged. Why? Because some of the alpha particles passed at or were deflected at large angles. They were repelled. They were repelled. Nucleus consists of protons and neutrons. They did not know that the nucleus had the protons and the neutrons. They knew that the nucleus was heavy, okay, most of the mass. They knew that it was heavy, and they knew that it was charged, but they did not know that it had protons and neutrons when they conducted this experiment. They did not know that for a fact. Okay. What is the nucleon number? The nucleon number of this chlorine has to be what? 35. Which change is occurring in the nucleus during beta emission? Beta emission to produce this electron. An electron and neutron become one proton? What? An electron and the proton become one neutron? What is this? A neutron becomes one proton and one electron. This does seem right. A proton becomes a neutron? No. So it is, yes. The neutron splits into a proton and an electron. The graph shows how the count rate registered by the counter near to a sample of radioactive source. Okay, it changes. The background count rate is 5 counts per minute. What is the half-life? So if you have background radiation, minus, divide, and plus, right? Minus, divide, and plus. 45 minus 5 is 40. 40 divided by 2 is 20. 20 plus 5 is 25. So at 25, the half-life would be 2 days. Which row about the orbits of the Earth and the Moon is correct? Approximate time for the Earth to orbit the Sun, 365 days. For the Moon to orbit the Earth, 30 days. Okay, that was easy. Which statement about the orbits of the comets is correct? Comets have an elliptical orbits. Okay, and the Sun is at the center of the orbit. Is the Sun at the center of the orbit? No, it is not. It is not at the center of the orbit. Okay, so it is B. They do have elliptical orbits, but the Sun isn't the center. Which row describes the power source of a stable star? Is it fission? No, it's fusion. The fuel is hydrogen. Which quantity can be determined using the brightness of a supernova? Brightness has to do with the distance. We need to memorize this. The brightness has to do with what? It has to do with the distance. Okay?